There's a pause.
We should start.
Recording in progress.
Let's go ahead and start and do a roll call.
Councilmember Keller.
Here.
Councilmember Happy.
Here.
Councilmember Seaver.
Here.
Councilmember Miller.
Here.
For Compton. Councilmember Emerling Baker. Here. Mayor King.
Here. Okay.
All right, so I'll read my staff report. At the September 23rd, 2024 meeting, council directed city staff to complete further research and present more options for updating the city's utility deposit structure beyond just the direct fund deposits. Staff reached out to other municipal electrical utilities and found that the two most common deposit options are direct deposit payments and surety bonds. Below is a link explaining surety bonds. The standard amount required was a 2-month rolling average that was reviewed and adjusted every 6 to 12 months. The length of time the deposit or bond needed to be in place varied from continuous to 5 years. The Springfield Utility Board had the most complete and well-defined deposit requirements and processes. The attached proposed deposit options and structure is based heavily on SUB's deposit structure. Council's options for tonight are discussion only and consensus to move forward. The proposed structure, a non-residential utility account security deposit process. Introduction. All customers requesting utility service are required to secure their accounts as outlined in Resolution 1247. All non-residential accounts must provide a security deposit equal to 2 months of their average utility bill, including all usages, base and meter fees, debt obligation fees, and any other fee assessed by the city over a 12-month period. Deposit amount determination. Similar business type. Pause here for a minute while people get seated.
Yeah. Move up to the table. All right.
All right.
To the individuals that just came, can you state your name so we can count that you in the minutes?
Me? Terry Brigham. Kim Brigham.
Great, thank you.
All right, so deposit amount determination, similar business type. New account to operate a similar business as the previous account holder at the same address will be required to pay a 2-month average utility bill security deposit based off the location's previous account holder's final 12-month period. Different business type. New account to operate a business different from their previous account holder at the same address will be required to pay a 2-month average utility bill security deposit based off the usage of similar businesses in the city's service jurisdiction. New construction. New accounts who will be operating out of new construction will use a 2-month average utility bill security deposit based off the usage of similar businesses and similar size facilities. Annual review of deposit amount. The city will perform an annual review of the billing amounts each August to determine any changes in the required security deposits. The city will provide a letter to the account holder explaining the results of the review and any changes in the security deposit amount. Length of time deposit is required. The security deposit must be in place for a minimum of 60 months, which is 5 years, of good payment history or until the account is closed, whichever occurs first. The deposit will be released after 60 months period, provided the account has had satisfactory payment history in the most recent 12-month period. If good payment history is not established after 60 months, the security deposit requirement will be extended until good payment history is established. Types of security deposits. Direct fund deposit. The account holder will pay the city directly the amount required to cover the 2-month average utility bill requirement. Surety bond. The account holder may obtain a surety bond through an insurance company in the amount equal to the 2-month average utility bill requirement. Waiving security deposit. No security deposit is required for customers meeting the following criteria. Customer has a commercial account with Cascade Locks for the same company or business at another address and has good credit for a minimum of 5 years. Account is an expansion. Added services and has a good credit for the last 5 years. Sewer/storm drain only accounts, signs and billboards, cell towers, traffic lights, flips in business name unless customer has demonstrated poor payment history, bioswale or irrigation only accounts.
Hey, I just wanted to thank everyone for coming and being part of this discussion. And, you know, we've got to figure something out, but we really want to hear from all the businesses too. So this is a collaborative effort. And so if anyone has any other ideas, thoughts, anything like that, we'd love to hear it. Go ahead, hang on. Councilmember Kate?
So just, I see a lot of people here that don't have a copy of the monthly report, and no, if we had a hard copy, they could be
Would
distributed.
anybody like a hard copy? Yeah, 3.
Yeah, hard copy.
I'll go make copies really quick.
Yep.
Yep.
It's great. What?
I said, I can't do the discussion without reading through that.
I know, thank you. All right, we'll get everybody copies.
No.
Okay, that's good. I have that.
And then just a reminder, everyone to silence your cell phones in case anybody has not. Or like another meeting I go to, if your cell phone goes off, you owe $1 in the pot. So I won't do that. It just, yeah.
Who gets the hot?
It goes to a nonprofit, the Alzheimer's Association. So. It is. Yeah, so everyone should. It works. Okay, we're gonna get everybody copies of what was read, because I know if I have a copy in front of me, I do much better.
Waiting for the copy, I was just curious how many people that are here had a chance to read through that before the workshop, or was this the first time y'all heard that proposed?
Did anybody have a chance to read through it? It's posted online? No? Just one? Just you?
I get paid to do it?
Okay.
That seems like.
Okay.
From 2 weeks ago,
What's that?
I mean, is it from the proposal that we had to yes. No, I haven't done it.
Is there a backstory on why this change is being made right now?
Well, Jordan, would you like to answer that? And I can too.
Yeah, we had a one business who unfortunately left the city with a bill of $18,000. We sent them to collections. This is the first time it's happened in recent history. And instead of taking the approach of, well, shucks, that's too bad, it's a one-off, we're trying to be proactive to make sure it doesn't happen again.
Most cities are going towards something similar to this that are similar to us. And so this is like Jordan said, this is about being proactive. It's not about penalizing anybody, anything like that, but moving forward as Cascade Locks grows, gets bigger, there's more construction, more businesses coming in. And so we've got to make sure it's fair and equitable for everybody and have some type of plan. So hopefully this doesn't happen again. That's the whole purpose of it.
So residential customers have a deposit already, where businesses don't.
They do. Everybody, regardless of residential, commercial, public body, industry, is $300, which for a resident is fantastic. That's more than enough. But when you have a business whose average bill is anywhere from $1,000 to $25,000 a month, $300 ain't doing anything.
How many businesses are averaging over $5,000 a month in utility costs?
Not many. Only a handful.
So if we had a handful of businesses that were maybe paying this larger deposit that, or like the city was more proactive about billing them. This deposit might not be necessary. I mean, I'm just posing other options, and
No, this is meant to ask questions, please.
Sure,
ask
this
questions.
is just a roundtable, and that'd be where I'd start with is. Obviously, this is a kickback from something the city witnessed or is a part of $18,000 bill. Is not something the city is gonna wanna deal with oftentimes, but. From my standpoint, it feels like the city is now. Reacting in a way that's causing more harm to new startup businesses than to established businesses that have. A cost that generates or has an overhead that generates that much electricity and or utility usage. And for business and entrepreneurship, which is my number one goal in Cascade Locks, is like, this doesn't help any startup. Right, this is, I'm not sure the perfect word here, but it certainly is not any easier to start a business with this new deposit in place. I'm not saying it shouldn't happen. I'm just saying it does make it harder for business in the city. And if we want businesses to be here, we should make it easier. But that's, I don't know, that's all I have to say. I'm sure I have more. We'll see.
And part of this, the way I always look at it, I'm in healthcare, but anytime a challenge comes up, it's kind of, I celebrate it in a way, not that I like challenges, but it's like, okay, this is a lesson learned for the city. So what can we do as a city, community, moving forward, so this doesn't happen again? Some users are very small, some users maybe 1,000 a month, 800 a month, I've heard different fees, and some are larger. So what we're trying to do is be proactive, so hopefully this doesn't happen again. And then to make it fair and equitable for everybody.
So at the last council meeting, we were presented with a proposed deposit structure for commercial account. And I think based on some of the feedback we were getting from people in the community, we decided to table that discussion and then send more to the workshop. And additionally, one of the other pieces of feedback we got from, I think, Jeremiah representing the port and the business C interaction with was the idea of introducing a security bonds. Would that be important?
That might have been more bogus.
That was Bo.
That was Bo.
That was
Thank you.
Bo.
I just wanted clarification on that.
Right,
And I guess I'm just curious, based on that addition, does anybody see this as being more business friendly? I mean, I know for my business, I have to carry a bond and it's not really cost prohibitive to get a bond in place. And I want to just bring up that I think that the validity of your statement is entirely, it's valid. We want to be business friendly, absolutely, but we also, it's beneficial to entrepreneurs and businesses that we have a healthy electric utility as well. So we have to manage both of those things. So I'm just curious, do you see this addition of the language about the surety bond to be beneficial to this agreement?
Yeah, yes, I mean, I don't know how much that's gonna be,
Annual
anyway,
cost.
yeah, and we do. Something similar with beer tax and things, we have to choose between these different options, and unfortunately after. Like this, after a amount of time, they say, okay, you're good, you don't need to do this anymore. And I feel conflicted because it's a small city. I'd probably rather be giving money to Cascade Locks than to an insurance company. But if it's $8,000 versus $300, then I'd go with the $300. The thing that's interesting to me is there's a big difference between, and I haven't heard this much talked about tonight, but it seems like we're considering doing this kind of retroactively for existing businesses. Is that right? Or
that's part of the discussion.
Yeah,
It's all part of the discussion.
yeah, because I mean, I definitely don't. If I were starting a new business, I wouldn't want to have to pay 2 months, but that's kind of what I'm used to. I mean, that's what PGE does, and that's or at least 1 month. I can't remember. So it is there, but when I read all the things about all the options about 5 years, 5 years, 5 years, and a lot of the people in here have run their businesses more than 5 years, it seems like the whole purpose of building that 5-year reliability is moved for all of them, and we're a year and a half from that. And so in that sense, for us, being selfish, I would say it does seem like we are either at or close to that threshold, and it would be unfair to start at zero right now for people, especially people that have been running businesses here for decades. And so to me, it's kind of two different conversations, really. It's the brand new versus the established.
Can you clarify that point? So if someone's been here for 36 months, they wouldn't be required to go another 5 years of payment to meet that 5-year requirement. It would be just a year and a half as I remember.
Correct, yes.
Okay.
Yeah, so my guess would be 90% of the businesses that have been here more than 5 years are golden. They'd get their deposit back and we'd move on. Unfortunately, we have some of our bigger businesses recent in town are less than 5 years. But their clock would have started when their account first opened, whether it was last month or 36 months ago.
Councilmember Seeger, you have your hand up?
Yes, thanks. So a couple of thoughts and maybe a question or two here. So for the city administrator, can you talk us through the surety bond process? Give us an idea of how much they cost for, again, let's say a customer, their average utility bill is $5,000 a month. Let's just take that as an example. What would their cost be? I know it varies a little based on their credit score because that is part of the analysis. Let's assume they have a decent credit score and they're pulling a surety bond for a $5,000 possible utility bill. What would the cost be to them? And then talk us through the scenario if, let's say, they're delinquent and they leave the city with an owing bill. What would the process be to actually pull that money? How involved is it for us to call that surety bond and get the money back? That's my first question. And then I'm kind of curious to hear council's thought is what about the idea of the city pulling a surety bond of we pick a big number, maybe $50,000-$100,000, but then we collectively charge our business owners to fund that. I'm not sure what that would cost, but something tells me that assurance would do that, and then we could break that cost up and basically cover any scenario on an annual basis, and that could be really maybe even extremely affordable for our large utility customers. But let's start with that surety bond process if we could, please.
So I reached out to Springfield Utility Board, who again, I based a lot of this off of theirs and I had not heard back then. I asked them those exact same questions and I tried to find quotes online as well and I couldn't get anywhere. So I don't really have an answer on those two. I did ask the city recorder about the last time we called a performance bond, but she was not involved in it. So I don't know that process. I'm hopefully get something back tomorrow. Again, I asked, but haven't heard anything back yet.
Can I ask, are there business owners who would be willing to share the cost of their surety bond and what the limit was?
The OLCC has $1,000 bond and it's about $100 a month, although it's through an insurance company and the insurance companies are tacking on more fees as of recently. So even though the bond is $100, it's now $100 plus $30 in fees
A month,
a year
a year.
A year.
Okay.
for $1,000 bond.
And can you please state your name so we know we're gonna register you here?
Sorry, Paul Carl, I'm with Paramount Forest Products, or currently with Wignetics.
Great, thank you.
And it might help for this body and people listening if, when we spoke, we said who we were and if we're representing somebody, because I think a lot of people don't know each
Okay.
other. I'm Denise, I'm Baker.
Chairman.
Port of Cascade Locks, put a few court businesses in here today. Jasper from Summit Man couldn't be here, but he asked me to speak on behalf. One of the things that we noticed with the Springfield example of utility board is, one, they serve 37,000 customers. That's a considerably larger district. It's also a considerable more amount of power. Obviously, a lot more users that are affected from a business standpoint and risk on the side of that utility district. And a piece that we saw that didn't make this, but is part of Springfield's, is that there's an option for a personal guarantee. So a personal guarantee option is available to accounts, qualified responsibility partners, sign a letter of personal guarantee. New accounts may be secured by a personal letter of guarantee signed by qualified responsible parties when the following conditions are met. If the personal guarantee has any history with Springfield Utility District, they must have good payment history. There's also responsible parties that are individual business owners, corporate presidents or partners, the same legal entity with satisfactory personal credit history. Satisfactory credit history shall be defined as a credit bureau report with no adverse information included but not limited to slow payments, repossessions, collections, judgments, or liens. the account has maintained good payments history. There's just a third option that's available that seems to fit a lot of the folks that are in this room. And maybe not the new business, maybe we really do take a stance with the new businesses and say, hey, you know, we got a new business, it's this for $18,000, these folks got in the room here, we see that as being a problem, and the new businesses that come to town, like Travis said, I'm sort of used to paying something, whether it's 1 month or 2 months or 3 months. But the folks that sat in the room and helped this council come up with a solution to this, maybe aren't the ones that need to bear the brunt of that. There's also another piece that's in there, and I don't want to open a huge can of worms, but the Springfield Utility District also pays back interest on any of those, any of that they collect. And so, you know, for those funds to sit there and collect interest and generate income for the city, I think that's cool. But I also think that it goes hand in hand with wanting to be business friendly for that to come back as a payment towards the business owners. I don't know what that looks like from an administrative standpoint. I know some of the stuff that we were just talking about with the surety bond with Bernard, that sort of sounded like administratively difficult. So I get that there's a big lift from administrative side on this, but there are certain pieces of the business in Springfield that we're coming from that seem to have some easier solutions, at least for existing businesses or businesses that come to town and clearly are making investments in a building, making investments in the business, trying to create jobs. I get it, if they come, they can't pass a basic credit inspection. Like, yeah, we should probably in those folks, right? If they look risky, act risky, can't produce documents, can't show their credit score, appear to be somebody that's gonna be a risk to the city. Yeah, absolutely. Let's make sure that they pay more than their fair share because they're the larger risk. The port's not a risk. We're not gonna leave our building. Thunder Island, it's not a risk. There are these established businesses that are not just going to up and disappear. We will see that long coming in the future for the light savings turn on. So.
I mean, these are standard practices for businesses. When we get new customers, when we do a credit check, we look for the same documents where we're looking to see how, if there's the risk that's going to be involved with a particular customer or vendor before we do business with them. So I think following that same mode for the city of Cascade Locks, which is a business in terms of the electrical, to follow the business practices that all businesses or any of the good businesses follow to mitigate the risks that they have. So there's a lot of business practices that can just carry over and you can follow in that only, just doing those types of things, due diligence.
Right, and I want to remind everybody, because I always hear like this city has 30,000, we only have 1,400, so we can't compare. But, or any city of any population, but I want to remind everybody, a debt is a debt. Whether, I mean, yes, Springfield has 30,000+ individuals, so maybe their risk is higher. But even though we have a lower, even if somebody doesn't pay $2,000, we're such a small city that impacts us as well. So population, you know, it can fluctuate.
I just feel like a heavy, I'm sorry, bring a question back later. I just feel like a heavy tourist town. And how, I understand you wanna break it up over, you know, the 12 months.
Right.
But that's a burden on all of us. So I don't understand, is there a sliding scale for those people that are 18,000 and we're 800? I mean.
That's what we're figuring in the conversation.
How would that, you know, that plus the deposit, is that gonna be broken up through the year, or you can expect it immediately? I mean,
That's what this discussion's
well,
about.
I mean,
Yeah, no,
no,
those are good.
touched on that. I mean,
Right.
How we.
So to back up and get a sense of scale for the problem. So it was $8,000, 18,000, whatever the number.
18.
Okay,
There's some
so
discrepancies there.
the number that for the total amount of dollar business that you do over the years and the number of years that you've been in business.
Mhm.
Is this a single event? Or have there been other events? So if a single event and, you know, you're doing, I don't know, hundreds of thousands over 20, 50 years, and you have one event of 18,000, I think the reaction to the scale of the problem is outsized.
Well, you weren't here when I spoke, when we started, but what we're trying to do is be proactive. The city is growing, it's getting bigger, we're gonna have more businesses in, hopefully rec center, new businesses. And so this is a challenge we're trying to mitigate.
Sure.
And so for future.
But that's
So-
understood, just as the impact to the businesses is the concern.
Right,
Just
So
for our curiosity, are you able to answer that question more? Or
for,
was that one, just one company, or what was the story there with the?
Yeah, this is by far the worst that we're aware of. I mean, there's been other smaller businesses or residential, but in terms of the amount of money, yes, it's the worst. So, but again, like Paul said, I mean, it's really a $2 million operation per year. So 18 grand is not that much, but again, things happen.
Is it because the city has no teeth to go after this money?
We send it to collections, and if we get it, we get it.
Is there an option?
can everybody raise your hands and then I'll call on you? Dave?
So the county puts liens on property, does the city have an option to put a lien on the property?
Not in terms of a utility bill. We looked into that 5 years ago or so. A while
At
back.
this particular time, we can't. There's other things that we need to put in place to be able to do that.
Yeah,
In our city code or just like?
I think there's some ordinance we have to update, but I'm not 100% sure.
There's processes that have to be put in place and notifications. It is in our charter, but there are legal processes that have to be put in place in order for us to be able to do it.
Just as we're having this discussion, it made me think about, I mean, it's not a P and L necessarily, but we're reviewing our financials at city. What's the impact of a customer not paying their $18,000 bill? I mean, it's not something we're budgeting for when we're doing the electric utility budget.
Correct.
But, so if we're not budgeting for it, we have an $18,000 revenue shortfall because someone doesn't pay their bill, where does that money come from?
We eat it. We just eat the cost.
General fund?
Yeah.
Point to this is that all of you that pay your bills on time are subsidizing that person that doesn't.
Yep.
You know, that's my point. It's sort of like in retail, the people that steal from, retailers actually affect the cost for everybody else that pays, so. I just want to bring up that point, and y'all weren't responsible, you wouldn't be here, but it is about protecting you as well.
Travis and then Bernard.
Yes, Travis from Burgess Greco. Yeah, so kind of going back to what Jeremiah said though, because again, kind of thinking of this through the lens of like new versus established businesses, and I am very much pro new business here, and I'm thinking through. I know I said I always know that you get hit with these costs, but it doesn't mean I like it, and I, as a new business owner, and especially if I'm thinking of a small family-owned business that's not a big operation, and they aren't experienced business owners, it's gonna be a big hit, big surprise. Oh wait, I've got to pay for 2 extra months of electric bill. So Jeremiah brought up the comment about the personal guarantee. Is that something that would be that the city could consider for people that just absolutely can't come up with extra cash at startup?
Like something that we can look and do more, and I'd like that you brought up and look at how that's written. Hang on 1 second. Yeah.
No.
Councilmember Sager?
Yeah, so just a side note, cities can lien delinquent utility bills on properties. We did it at Gresham. Kathy's right. It's a process. You have to follow. You have to check a bunch of blocks before you do that. But please know that's not the cure-all. I mean, you can lien a property and that thing can sit unsold for decades. I mean, I could show you, pages and pages of accounts that have all these liens on them, and we're not getting any revenue because they're just sitting there unsold. So it's an item, but it's not. It really doesn't address your short-term, defaults and cash flow in a responsive manner. But for the record, I do think the city should have those conditions set, and we should do that if someone leaves us with a delinquent account. I think we should pursue both collections and liens on any delinquent account. Okay, so I want to say that. And then I'm for what it's worth, I support what Mr. Blue mentioned regarding, reviewing someone's credit record and seeing if they are a smaller risk than somebody who's unproven in the marketplace. And it would be my intention that whatever we agree to, that should be an impact on whatever policy, deposit policy falls on that customer. So I very much am supportive of that. And whatever we end up settling on, I hope that will be part of the analysis done when a customer is required to meet these obligations. What I'm curious about from the business owners is, and I advocated for this after I saw the staff report last week, is the idea of, one, we give business owners, if we settle on a 2-year a 2-month deposit requirement, again per those conditions, not less than a 5-year credit record, blah blah blah. If we settle on accounts that don't feel those are required we give them, say, I don't know, a year or even 18 months to put that deposit together. And then from the day one they start building that deposit, they earn interest on that account. I would be surprised, but I don't really know y'all's financials. But if I'm in business and I know I could kind of have a savings account, because that's what this would act like, and achieve a rate. Right now, the LGPI, that's where our bank account, it sits in LGPI. It earns 5.3%. That's a heck of a return for a cash account. And it would be very much, again, if we do that, I would be very much advocating for that on behalf of our large utility customers. So what I'm kind of curious to get some feedback on, if we gave you time to put the deposit together and you could get that type of interest rate return, would that make this more palpable for you as a business customer in Cascade Locks?
Someone else.
I guess my question would be like, is that something the city could do for us, where the city, if we were to have to go get a bond and it was $300 a year, the city, for like a $3,000 bill, the city goes out and says, hey, we're gonna charge an extra $30 a month until you get to $3,000, and then that $30 a month that you're putting into the fund will come back to you in interest once you build up to that, and then and that way we don't have to it just comes out on our bill. We don't have to do any extra paperwork. We don't have to go through, because I think one of my biggest concerns is, if we all have to go get bonds, do all this stuff, it's just more paperwork, there's more burden on the business owners. And all that money ends up going out to some insurance broker who's just like, sweet, I made $300.
Right.
And it caused a bunch of paperwork for the business. And guess what? The city really got insured against a rare occasion of something happening.
Right.
And I think Kim or Terry touched on it earlier, but like having a threshold, I think is very important too, because I can certainly see a business that has like a $5,000 to $10,000 electrical bill being a really big issue. But if you're like under $1,000 or under $5,000, I don't know why we're going to make all these people do extra paperwork, have to do something that they have to add on to their already busy to-do list. Now you got to go do all these other things over here just to pay this power bill when you're really not that big of a risk to the city. So I think thresholds would be key, and then if you do go above a certain threshold, having the city have a built-in, hey, we're going to collect a little bit extra on the side in case you ever jump ship, that you're covered. And I mean, I think the city already kind of does that anyways with the, if your transformer blows, who pays for that transformer? That goes to the city, right? Like there is a bunch of this incidental accident stuff or crazy stuff happening. So I'd say, can we just bake it into our current power bills, give people interest off everything, and create thresholds? That would be my.
Well, if I could, that would be my intention. That type of structure you just laid out, Mr. Lips. I'd like to hear maybe from a larger utility company like Mr. Turner. What's your reaction to a proposal like that?
This is Bo Turner. Of all of the options presented, I mean, I suggested the surety bond a couple weeks ago, and between the surety bond and kind of a ramp up to a deposit and just having the utilities self-insure through rates. This is honestly kind of painful to say as a very rate sensitive business, but I would see the city self-insuring through a rate increase as being less impactful to us than a 2-month deposit that we build up to or a surety bond. Just because we may, in order for the city to be protected, need like call it a 1 to 2% rate increase, and a surety bond might be more like 3 to 10%, depending on what kind of business you are. So I don't have a clear, I mean, the preference for us is just to be trusted and not need to change anything, of course, especially at our size. But I think the cheapest for everybody would probably be just the city having some kind of self-insurance that's built in through the rate that's set aside for these kinds of situations.
I would just pat on that and agreement, but looking at some of the companies, I don't know where we rank up as far as the big, but I'm gonna assume that my facility is one of the biggest. You know, at a 0.5% or a 0.25%, we would probably cover everybody's. So, you know, that those numbers could be not at that high, but very small, you know, fractions of pennies, and still meet whatever threshold that you're looking for to have in your bank account to cover businesses that go out of business, which would be the high risk businesses.
Someone else had their hand up there.
I'd love to hear from each of the businesses if you had opinions. I know it's quick to come up with ideas when you're just looking at this tonight. And I want to say to City Administrator Bennett, thank you for this draft, and that's what it is, right? It's a draft, it's an idea for you to speak from, and I love Mr. Lip's thoughts. I would like to hear the options that work for you, and that maybe our city could offer options. Because maybe the surety bond is something that other people like. Maybe this small amount worked in, and this personal guarantee, I presume, is a legal document that you spoke of from the court. That if there were options, and if you can think of other options even beyond tonight, I think it is important that the businesses have spoken about what options work for them. And I understand that was a big debt that we have to take on. I am also a believer you don't make policy on one bad seed. But it sounds like there were others, and I do believe we need to look toward the future. But I don't want this policy to be punitive to our businesses, so I'd love to hear their ideas.
And I think also, we're having this discussion, it could be, we talked about the 5-year. Many of the businesses have been here longer than 5 years. So the city council, everyone, we're not saying you've been here X amount of years, now you have to pay a ton of money. I'm looking around the room, I'm pretty sure everyone's in good standing and has been in good standing. So part of this is coming up with ideas, thinking about, because if you all know what it's like to have a business and start a new business. And so think of that like for new businesses coming in, not just you today, but new businesses coming in, because you've all been there and you've all started your business. So what would be helpful for new businesses as well?
So can I ask, if I could ask a question, what is the dollar amount that you want sitting in an account to cover somebody that leaves? So let's say, is it the biggest customer is gonna be $30,000 potentially get going, 40,000? What is the number that you want sitting in a bank account to cover for somebody that skips? And then we back into that number through phases, and I would suggest a multi-pronged approach. So you do the due diligence on credit and then the security of the business coming in or existing. You look for those types of things, and then you set you could do as a temporary hike at a fraction percentage until you hit that dollar amount that's in the bank, and then just leave that there. It could be, even if it's not giving interest back to us, It could still be just there as security for you. And I don't think it would take a significant amount of time to hit a threshold of if you wanted 30,000. I don't know who's at one company's got 30,000 over a month.
Everyone's gonna be different. I know
And
what
then,
business they're
you know,
building.
the shut off times, if you're delinquent, you know, reduce those shut off times. If you don't pay in 30 days, you're gonna be shut, you know, or whatever the terms are that are agreed upon with the business based off risk.
Right.
I'll add a new idea. My name's Colin, Stumptown network administrator here in town. I do a lot of work for Abundant Minds. I see that, you know, it would take 10 customers of all this, of relatively small size to all leave and stop paying their bills 1 month to even approach this one customer that took off and dined and dashed with the electricity. There's got to be a certain threshold that where this whole discussion actually takes over. Is it $10,000 a month? Is it $20,000 a month? Our operation is using $80,000 a month worth of electricity in this town. So perhaps we can switch to a bi-weekly payment system, so there's less exposure on the city side for risk. Maybe it's a weekly program where we make a weekly payment, and the city only sees 7 days of our electricity as a risk exposure. Or perhaps we share the risk and we pay, I don't know, 7 days in advance. So where the city has a deposit, albeit what you're describing in this proposal is on our part, $150,000 loan. It's 0%. Doesn't really like work for us. So we can reduce the risk and pay our electric bills on time without exposing the city to our departure.
That might be an option for the larger users. Like,
Right.
I know the breweries, restaurants, things like that, they're not gonna wanna pay it weekly. But it might be something where the larger users,
But they have a $3,000 bill a month. It's nothing. The city can self-insulate in that.
well,
I like that idea, actually. Quite frankly, we have so many bills coming and going that when 5 giant bills fall on the same day because of the way the banks worked out that week, that hurts more than if I could spread all my bills to be like once a week. So yeah, taking $3,000 and splitting it into 4 weekly payments, 4.5 weekly payments, I actually do like that.
We're already amortizing a lot of the costs, it's fit very well. And that's at no additional cost or no impact to anybody for, you know, I would still suggesting, you know, a risk management, even a consultant for risk management for how to judge or how to put in a policy to establish how risky a customer is. And what their payment schedule, what their terms would be, just like, you know, any businesses, we set terms with our customers, net 30, net 15, net 30, net 60, depending on how big or how reliable they are as a customer.
And I certainly also like the idea of the city creating a fund of the largest user and working back from there, you know, whether it's, you know, 0.01% added, you know, over all these businesses over 5 years, finally get to a point where there's just a fund that, you know, sits there to insulate against the worst case scenario instead of going out to an insurance company or something. You know, I think the city could eventually self-insure it. I think it'd be beneficial.
Right. I think what we've experienced on a municipal level here is shrinkage. And it's described in the business community as somewhere between 1% and 2% nationally. And so this event was, I hate to say it, was bound to happen. Somebody was gonna bounce and not pay their bill. So,
that's what we're having to meet. We're trying to
correct.
mitigate it and not repeat this.
So combining the two ideas here, so we know there's a dollar amount that you wanna have in a bank account to cover any problems. We reduce the times, the payment times bi-weekly or weekly or whatever that is, that requires a smaller dollar amount in your bank account. Yeah, and I think insurance, going with insurance or bonds or all that stuff requires outside parties for paperwork. It's a hassle in a bureaucracy of a bigger business, and it's a hassle for a small business as well.
So what if somebody else bounces? somebody else leaves the city with that $18,000 bill, do we start over?
No, that's why we're having this
No, but
conversation.
I mean, I
Right.
mean, but that money's gone. That money that becomes
Yeah.
the number you come up
So we get
with.
that pool, everything's going in there, and someone that bounces with $18,000, then
Are we
how's that
starting over?
money
Yeah.
get
But
replenished?
if the business decides to leave and they give 6 months notice that they're leaving, how do you get the money back to them?
Snyder, how big volume dollar wise is electric co-op here as far as your, what's your annual revenue?
About $2 million,
$2 million.
give or take.
So percentage wise, that don't hardly, Jordan, you got your calculator there, take 18,000 into. Yeah. Oh, it's off the bank. But I mean, we're all subject, all businesses subject to loss. Somebody walks out of your restaurant and don't pay and stuff, and I mean, I don't know whether it was 8,000 or 18,000. I've heard both two numbers, and that's a pretty small amount to go through all this other nonsense.
Well, I do know in Cascade Locks, every single dollar matters. Every single dollar. And 18,000, yes, I agree with you, it's a small percentage compared to the 2 million. But if part of, once again, having this conversation is we're trying to mitigate and not have this challenge again. So moving forward, new businesses coming in, what do we do? So, because we're such a small city, 2 million sounds like a lot, but it takes a lot of funds to run the city, and we're just trying to be mindful of our dollars. And so this doesn't happen again.
Just to piggyback on that, I mean, I think the point with the discussion of shrinkage is just that is a really minuscule amount. The effort that goes
Right.
into creating all of this might cost more than $18,000, and certainly does for the businesses, and might deter businesses and all that. So I do think even though we're trying to recoup it and think of it as a big number, 18,000 into 2 million is a rounding error, and for a lot of businesses, and I know that's it for us. Like, there are certain things we do, but we just assume some people are going to walk out on their tab, and the amount of work it would take to prevent that is more expensive than letting a couple people walk out every month. And so I would say that is an important point to consider. But I've heard a lot of great ideas.
So I did the math on that, it was 0.9%, so 1%, rounded up to 1%. So what I'm hearing you say is that if this is just the cost of doing business, then we should include that in our budget and just raise our rates. So all of you all understand you would be paying a little bit extra every month to cover the bill of somebody that's delinquent. Is that correct? Is that what I hear you saying? That would be better than paying a
The
deposit?
suggestion is till we get to the production.
No, he was saying it's just considered as the cost of doing business and don't do any of this.
Yeah.
That's what I understood. Is that we're doing all this because we're trying to prevent a shrinkage of 1%. Correct. And so the one other way of accommodating that is just to write it into the budget and raise our rates, and it just gets spread out, the peanut butter spread, and high usage users are gonna eat that.
Or
That's
absorb,
just one suggestion, that's something.
or absorb,
Absorb, yes,
like the
absorb.
rest of us have to do.
And realistically, how much of an actual increase would that be for you? I mean, I have no idea. I mean, I'm not prepared to answer that question, but I just want to clarify that was one of the suggestions that was brought up, and is that
Yeah, I
something
mean,
that's a reasonable solution?
Yeah, I mean, I'm kind of just stealing other people's suggestions here, so it wasn't, I totally mind, but from my perspective, it's kind of like you said, it's silly to be saying something that's gonna cost me money, but objectively, it does seem like a 1% increase in price, to protect the city wouldn't be felt that much by most companies, and the bigger companies would feel it more than the smaller companies, and increases happen, and I think, you know, it makes a lot of sense in all of these ways to just have a 1% increase, or a 0.9% increase. And quite frankly, I know people that worked at places like Home Depot and stuff where their shrinkage is going to be over closer to 5%. So 0.9 is pretty good. Yeah.
I do think it's, just to clarify that point though, this is one user that was $18,000, it's very different than if Bo were to ditch on an $80,000 bill, that'd be a instead of 1% would be 4%, right? So I think that when we're looking at actually making that adjustment, we'd have to consult people a lot smarter than me to figure out what that number is, but.
Well, you put in the practices, so maybe the thing can't, sorry, Travis's point, can't, the solution can't outsize the problem. So you do it's a multi-pronged approach, you do the due diligence and the risk management. You set some variables for different customers and then you set your dollar amount that you need to have in the bank to cover those costs. And through the risk management, you can reduce that dollar amount by having the weekly or reduced payment term times, which doesn't hurt anybody. And cut off dates for when they're, so that you don't have the exposure to avoid the exposure. So I think, for 1% or 4%, it's bigger business even more, because that's 1% of 40,000, 80,000, whatever amount. I know when I have to go through my financials for my business, I have to explain 1%. So, I think, but if it's to hit a threshold, then to avoid some bigger amounts, and that can stay in your account at that number, with your due diligence that you're going to be doing in your risk management, that doesn't require that number to be as big, then I think that's feasible, but not a general overall forever it's 1%, just so we can cover ourselves.
No.
So, I mean, that 1% though is in 1 year. This is the first time this happened in probably over 20 years getting on, so it's like if you do
There's
that,
been other accounts, just not as.
not as large, but
Yeah.
I think to charge everybody 1% for the 1 year, it's like if you do it over a 5 or 20 year span, I mean, you can get down to 0.05% or something. And then once you hit that threshold of collecting all that money, the worst is that tax gets added onto everybody's bill for forever, when really, hey, you generated this a little bit of extra money in this fund to cover everybody and we're good. But I mean, yeah, I certainly think once you had a bunch of years, doesn't happen that often. If it was happening every year, I'd certainly say, yeah, something gonna change.
Okay. Councilmember Seeger, you had your hand up.
Yes, thank you. So I wanted to circle back to something Councilmember Happy said earlier in the meeting, that the idea of the reason for the deposit policy is to not socialize the cost. The deposit policy holds individual customers responsibility for their utility, and we have a safety net if they leave the city with unpaid services. Now, the idea of raising the rate across everybody, and am I correct in understanding that would just be the commercial, public, and industrial customers? Is that right, Mr. Jordan?
Yeah, this is just pertaining to non-residential accounts.
Okay, so it's only their rates that would go up to cover this fund, this risk fund, if you want to call it that, for future or unanticipated delinquent accounts. So if that's what I'm hearing from the businesses, it sounds like you're more in favor, again, of socializing these costs, and then instead of holding individual utilities responsible for their obligations. I just want to make sure I'm clear on that. And the second thing that I would almost feel like we should talk to an economist or something, like, if we establish this fund, are we creating something called moral hazard, where if the businesses know, hey, there's this fund, what's their incentive to not leave the city with that bill? If they know, hey, that money's been set aside thanks to all the happy customers here in Cascade Locks. When I'm done, I'm not going to pay my last 2 months, because it ends up being 2 months. If you're familiar with the utility billing process, we read the meters, we send out the bill, they get a late charge, they get a red tag. You can accumulate 2 months bills before your service is cut off. So anyway, I just want to bring those points up and just make sure I'm clear on what the businesses are saying regarding this proposal.
Oh, hang on, she had her hand up.
So my thought was, once we reach that threshold, I mean, there has to be an accounting of how much each individual one of us has put into it. So what he's saying, if that person leaves because it's already covered, well, he's only covered a certain amount. Or they, or whatever,
Right.
and we still have our certain amount that has to be kept track of as well. So when the new businesses come in, and then they end up making their deposit or a magic number,
Right.
whichever comes first, that we all know where we stand and how much we have our fingers in the pot.
Yeah, so it wouldn't be a deposit, you'd still have to do your job of managing the business and going after delinquent accounts, just like every other business. So it's not a deposit, it would just be, you guys need a safety net, how do you get to the safety net? I think the first step before any of the working group can go ahead so that we can, as business owners, you want us to weigh in on this, but we can't weigh in on it until we know how many dollars we're talking, what that looks like. So step one would say, I would challenge the council would come back and say, we need a safety net of this amount of money. And then come back to the working group and say, okay, so how do we get to this number? How do we back in? If it's too big of a number, and it doesn't make sense for anybody, then I guess I'm thinking of a smaller number that we're gonna be putting into a smaller threshold that we establish as not a deposit, is just covering you guys so that you can continue, so that we don't have to do any more egregious policies that impact us. So from a business standpoint, we're just trying to mitigate what is trying to be done to us. So there's an injustice trying to happen onto the businesses that, because of the thing that happened to you. So we don't want that. So let's I would say, let's start with what is the number that you need to come to so that this can go away and we can participate in that, but in a way that works for us. Does anybody have an idea on the number that you're trying to get to?
Well, for me, and I'm thinking, because we are so small, let's say it's a business that's $700 a month. And they skip out and they live this with 70. Yes, you're gonna have the cost of business where you're gonna lose money sometimes, somebody doesn't pay their bill, walks out. But in a small city of us, 1,400 people, every single cent counts. So for me, if somebody has a $700 a month bill and they go to, let's say, 2 months somehow it's 2 months, it's $1,400. Every little cent, it does impact the city. So that's what I'm trying to avoid. So it's not, this is this fee for every single person, because each business is so different. Some are high users, some are not. Some businesses are $200 or $300 a month. So, but every single cent counts when you're in a small city. So that's.
Yeah, so the Southern Council's point, it's still socializing across all the businesses.
Great.
Hang on, Dave. Councilmember Baker.
To point to Councilman Seeger's question, I thought I heard some businesses like that 1% and some are not, because it's, if I'm speaking incorrectly, please somebody let me know. I've heard several good ideas, and I personally liked the language used from this gentleman on the multi-pronged approach, and I would hope that City Administrator Bennett could research some of these, because if you're right, we need an amount. And I also want us to be new business friendly. We are working on that with our, looking at our codes, maybe getting a new planner. We need to be new business friendly, as well as protect the businesses that are here. So we need to come up with an amount or what it is we need to feel secure financially. And then, run it by our attorney, run it by risk management. Can we offer these 5 options to the businesses, and those, if it's the 60-month, you've already been here, yay, so I don't know if City Minister Bennett, you've heard all these ideas and you're putting them down and you're thinking, yes, I can research these, I'm happy to share my notes. I don't know if the businesses think, what do you think about the options, like which ones do you really want to have us?
Okay, hang on, I want to get this gentleman and then Eric.
We're here. From my standpoint as a business owner, this feels like a city problem that the city is trying to solve by mitigating the city's cost. If the shortfall is $18,000. Shouldn't there be a city fund that is set aside for emergency and catastrophic failures of the system financially, which would be somebody leaving with a $50,000 utility bill? I don't know all the ways that the city collects revenue, but if it is just the utilities, then let's work with the billing system so that we can create a system for new users that is not more onerous than it already is. And we can create a system so the city can get that contingency fund in the city's name, and it's the city's money somehow through their rate collections or through their collections. The businesses here are also pro-city Cascade Locks. We want the city to grow and survive and prosper as well. But what we don't want to do is pay outside insurance agents. What we don't want to do is add more paperwork to our process. If the city can solve this problem through all the city means, and this is going to take money and time no matter what we do, but if the city can solve the problem and just come to the business owners and say, what we'd like to do is X, we have a contingency fund we're trying to create, this is what we want to do, and then all the business owners go, great, we want to support that. This is our share, and there's lots of good ideas here. We have risk mitigation, we have high users and low users. Most everyone here is a very low user. Very few of us are high users over even $10,000, $5,000 of utility costs. I don't know if they should be treated differently. That feels weird to say as a business owner myself, but certainly they are a higher risk to the city, so maybe the 7-day period applies to them more apt than the monthly period. But as a business owner, I would much rather see the city solve this problem with the city's fund and contingency or whatever that might be for their shortfalls. This is not going to be the first one. It might be the first one that kicks off this discussion. Great, but it won't be the last. And the city should be prepared for these things in the future. Like any normal business, we have insurance, right? If the city doesn't have insurance for this, can't the city just buy insurance for this? Like, I guarantee the city can. It's another surety bond. That's where I'd like to pause and say.
All right, thank you. Eric?
I guess I kind of want to piggyback on that a little bit. I only knew of Hood River Co-op and Pacific Power, there's local utilities within Hood River County. They are both a year. Their deposit is for a year. Pacific Power has like Springfield, a level, theirs is 10,000. I don't think the city could do 10,000 on their deposit. I feel like the response of the city should be, there was an error made. How can we move forward to make this? I don't feel like this is a situation that should be placed on existing businesses. This 2-month deposit is natural. So if a business wants to complain about a 2-month deposit, then you're gonna have difficulty going to an electric company to get service. It seems everywhere I look is 2 months, 2 months, 2 months, with some maybe variations that Mr. Blue has suggested as well. Pacific Power has that, Hood River Co-op has that. We can do that, but it's not on these people here to fix the problem of the city that already existed. And to go back to what other people, we can't just install a fee. We have to vote on fees. And maybe because it's a utility, it's a little bit different, but like, we can't just switch and be like, hey, we want to raise our rates. Like you guys can with your costs. Like you can increase the cost of a beverage 50 cents. We can't do that because it takes a vote of the people. It's not simple.
And there's another side of it too, you know. When the pipes get backed up, who do we expect to come help us? When the power goes out, who do we call? You know, we're expecting them to also support us. So there has to be some kind of collaborative solution instead of just, it's your fault or it's your fault. And it's your responsibility, it's your responsibility.
And I kind of want to move, yes, I want to, the topic, I don't want the focus to be on the 18,000. Because like I said, I don't care if it's a business that comes in and it's $500 a month and they skip out on 2 months, that's $1,000. I don't wanna see the city lose that $1,000. So whether it's 18,000, 30,000, $1,200, whatever it is, so. That's what so it's gonna be a little different, but I do, what Councilmember Keller said, the existing businesses here that have been in business for more than 5 years, all those. I don't wanna see you impacted by this, but I think you, as business owners, you provide really good knowledge, experience and everything moving forward, helping the city to come up with options and solutions for new businesses coming in. So.
We got 20 minutes left, so I want to be
Yeah.
really brief with my comments, but one.
Actually, about 7.
Oh, 7.
Yeah.
Sorry. Okay, so we're done at 17, so I'll be.
Yep.
as
We could go to 7:20 and give us 10 minutes to reconfigure the room, but.
And so where do funds come from out of our budget that we don't have budgeted for? What is that fund called that we put the money into to cover things that aren't expected or planned for or budgeted for?
Contingency.
Contingency. So we do have money to set aside in contingency for things that we cannot anticipate or, but is it a good thing to be diving into contingency funds, especially if there's habitual, you know what I mean? It's something to try to avoid, right?
Yeah, no, I agree, and frankly, with Eric Keller, 2 months isn't out of sight, that's not out of order or normal, and that's fine. If we need to institute that, the city can do that, that doesn't bother me at all, as a business owner, I can. 1 month feels better, but that's more residential, commercials too, fine. My standpoint is, I don't wanna do more paperwork, I don't wanna have to pay an insurance agent to go get a bond, because that's, I'd rather go get the bond instead of paying over the 10 grand or whatever it is that I pay for the 2 months. Unless it's collected over time, like some people have suggested, which then I don't have to think about, I just write the check like, oh, it was every month and it's fine, and it's nice and easy, and the city is doing the work for me, which is what I view as this is the city's problem, and we're trying to help by paying our bill on time. That's helpful. They can account for that.
So I think it's point 1 is we do have money set aside for things we don't share. Point 2 is I do think that there's a relationship between what you all see on your P&L and your utility bill and what you see on the top line revenue. Those that pay more in expenses probably have a little bit higher top line revenue. I mean, there's a correlation there between the two. So that's why it's 2 months, not a dollar amount, because it needs to be somewhat reflective of your business, and it's gonna be different for a brewery than it is for a data center, which got a lot more labor versus the other business model. Right, yeah, you know, it's a little bit different, right? But there's a correlation between top line revenue and expenses, the point I'm bringing up there. So those people that have a higher utility bill and maybe have a bigger deposit are probably gonna have a higher top line revenue to absorb. That is, I guess, the point I was bringing up. And third point, Terry's example is, what you brought up, Terry, I thought was great. It's not, you guys, I'm an entrepreneur too, I'm a business owner. I'd like you all to kind of put yourselves a little bit in the city's perspective of how would you do this if this was your business? How would you control the risk and exposure to your business if you were put in the same situation? You have to, judge the creditworthiness of potential customers when you're determining terms. This isn't something that's new to all of you. So I guess just kind of keep that in mind. And what's good for business is good for the city. What's good for the city is good for business. So I do think that we are not opposed. We are working together on this. So.
So in the business thing, so we have to deal with the risk, but it's also we're competing. So the city's got, if it wants to continue to grow, and if it wants to get, if you want long-term not be in these problems, it requires you to grow. And to get better and have more businesses, so any policy needs to come into place with knowing that you're competing for our business to be at your location, because we don't need to.
So if I could get everybody to raise their hand when they want to, I know Jeremiah you're doing. You were next.
Yeah.
Okay.
So, our organization, when we started this back in, late 2023, we built a facility to intend to help stabilize the prices for the city. Spent $600,000 on this property, and this proposal puts another $150,000 of deposit at 0% onto our books. So
300,000 at full scale.
Thank you, Bo. So it is a considerable expense to us at 0%. I know I can make 12% with that capital. So I would say if we're gonna put a deposit down, we would have to demand some kind of return on that. Otherwise, there's 5 businesses in this town that would actually impact the revenue of the city if any of us decided to bail and skip out. So I think that not the concern is the cost, it's the exposure. And socializing the cost is not anybody wants to do here. No one wants the rates to go up and for somebody to feel obligated or feel authorized to skip out on their last bill. I think it's ridiculous. I think it should be the large companies that have any type of exposure to the city's revenue lines, have a personal experience with them, have an agreement, and have those risks mitigated, however, on a case-by-case scenario. So like 5 of us.
Travis?
Yeah, I was, we've been talking a lot about the numbers, and I think to me, there's kind of the 2 aspects of risk, and one's just accepting that there's gonna be some people skipping out of their bill, and we just eat that cost and we figure out how to budget it, or there's this deterrent, and I think we talked more on that early on, whether it's a deterrent or just gauging the credit worthiness of those people, that you don't have to look at just the money if you just make sure this doesn't happen. And so to me, there's kind of picking a lane, or you're doing a little bit of both. But I've heard a lot of really good ideas that I'm all in favor of. I think there's a lot of interesting outside the box type stuff, but I also was kind of curious if we're like beholden to what was in here, like this is the way we're heavy leaning. Why couldn't you just shorten the duration, or because Eric's right, everybody kind of expects to pay 2 months, but why couldn't we do 1 month? Why couldn't we do 36 months instead of 5 years or something? Because if I'm looking at it as a small business owner that's starting up, or a big business owner that's starting up, if I can see that number come off my books in 12 months or 18 months, it's a lot better for me than 5 years. And same as 1 month of payment versus 2 months, it's a big deal. And if you cut either of those in half, you still eliminate a ton of the risk. I think most of us know that the earlier in the company's life cycle, the more likely they are to fail. So once you get past a year, 2 years, it's less likely. And going to a 1 month security deposit instead of a 2, if we don't do any of the other ideas, that would still be a huge help for us to cut that security deposit in half. And we've been here 3.5 years, so I think our risk is pretty low that we're going to skip on a bill. So I was just going to kind of throw that out there as, could we just do plan A, but cut it down?
So what about this? I know we have a council meeting at 7:30, but what if all the business that you send an email to Jordan, you're gonna get bombarded by emails, it's good. But bullet point your ideas, and it sounds like, I know, Dave, you brought up the insurance and the cost and the fees and more paperwork, I can see that. So, but if you could email Jordan in a bullet point format, say, these are kind of my ideas, I think that would be really helpful. I don't have my paper, I gave it away, but we're not, council and the city, we're not saying this is the way it is. We're looking for input from businesses, we're looking for ideas. So in the interest of time, does anybody have any other comments?
Madam Mayor, Butch has his hand up.
Great, Councilman Miller?
Yeah, this thing was a problem that was created by the city when the Bitcoin first started, because here you had a very volatile business, and we didn't think of putting in a surety bond when they first came here. I mean, that should have been due diligence a long time ago. So to fix this problem, it's to do a surety bond now. And if any other of these high energy users come in, is to get a surety bond for them and not put it on our current businesses. And that's it.
Any other comments?
Well, I represent one
Yeah.
2, and
Yes.
3, that I'm in an agreement with the other Bitcoin mine in town. And I can guarantee you that it wasn't Bitcoin that caused this problem, it was management.
Well, and that's why we're trying to move forward. You
Right.
can't live in the past. That's
Right.
what we're trying to do, is not relive this. So that's the whole purpose. I wanna, let's not
Just
talk about
wanted
the
to clear
18,000.
about that.
Yeah, no. You pay your bill, you're good.
I'll also,
So-
I also want to propose that we fully excuse Snyder Senior from any responsibility for making a deposit since.
He's been here forever.
To grant his land for our substation.
Yeah.
Everybody needs to owe him a debt.
All right, Biff.
I have a release, right?
Yes, you do. Yep.
So, but if I could get everybody to, Jeremiah, hang on, but if I can get everybody to email Jordan, bullet point it, I mean, it's gonna be much easier for him to process if you say, here are my ideas, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, whatever, thoughts. Jeremiah?
Just the port is in a unique business, but we're not the only one in this business in which we are the landlords of commercial buildings. Bob Sturrock has a number of buildings, and so just something in that consideration too is the folks that have multiple units that are renting out to different renters over and over and over, and the administrative costs of my deposit, what's it based on? Is it based on banking? Is it based on the last 2 months of the person who was just there? And just the lift from an administrative process of us sending you funds and then us getting those funds back. Do you pay interest? And if you did, was it for the 2 months that I had it or not? Just, there's only a few of us that are in that actual business of providing that, but we do exist. Port's one of them, Bob Service and other folks that own 1 or 2, 3 buildings, but it impacts them in a sort of different way, but at least wanted to represent them. So something to think about.
All right, last
Sorry,
question.
We get all of the city council members' emails to include them in that.
They're listed on the website, yeah. Okay. Any other parting questions or thoughts?
That's awesome.
Okay, I'd like to, it is 7:17 and we're gonna.
For those of you online, we'll be ending this meeting and restarting the regular meeting at 7:30. Thank you.